Good morning and welcome. I'm Ben Ayers, Dean of the Terry College of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Mason Public Leadership Lecture with John Crowley. Today's lecture is part of the Terry's Leadership Speaker Series, a series that has brought numerous distinguished leaders to campus, representing both public and private sectors. The speakers have educated and inspired our students. We are fortunate today to have the namesake of the Mason Public Leadership Lecture with us today, Keith Mason. Keith is a devoted UGA alumnus who has served as treasurer of the University of Georgia Foundation for over 10 years. This lecture series reflects one of Keith's passions and important component of the University of Georgia experience, public leadership. He shares my belief that this university, the birthplace of public higher education in America, should be producing leaders for our state, our nation, and our world. We are indebted to have Keith and his wife Twinker with us and for their generosity in supporting this lecture. Thank you for being with us today. Following conclusion of today's discussion, Keith will provide some concluding remarks for us. We are glad to have Provost Hugh and many UGA administrators, alumni, and friends with us today. We are also honored to welcome John Crowley's wife, Eileen, as well as their daughter, Megan, and son, John Jr., along with Megan's nurse, Cindy Bailey. Please join me in welcoming them. At this time, I'd like to introduce an outstanding student at the University of Georgia, Miss Emily Austin, who will be introducing today's speaker. Emily is an honors student. She is majoring in psychology with an emphasis in neuroscience, and she's also minoring in biology. She is also pursuing a certificate in personal and organizational leadership through the Terry College. She is a team leader at Mercy Health Center. She is a former UGA orientation leader. And next fall 2020, she will be attending the Medical College of Georgia, where she will begin her journey of becoming a pediatric physician. Please join me in welcoming Emily to the podium.
Good morning and welcome to the Mason Public Leadership Lecture Series. My name is Emily Austin, as Dean Ayers mentioned. I'm a leadership fellow with the Institute of Leadership Advancement here at the University of Georgia, studying psychology. The Mason Public Leadership Lecture features prominent business leaders who have contributed significantly to their communities or spent time in a public service role. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing Mr. John Crowley, the chairman and CEO of Amicus Therapeutics, a global biotechnology company focusing on developing treatments for rare genetic diseases. Mr. Crowley's involvement in biotechnology stems from the diagnosis of two of his children with Pompe disease, a severe and often fatal neuromuscular disorder. In his fight to find a cure for them, Mr. Crowley became the co-founder, president, and CEO of Novozyme Pharmaceuticals, a biotechnology startup conducting research on treatments for Pompe disease. In 2001, Novozyme was acquired by Genzyme Corporation, where Mr. Crowley continued to play a lead role as senior vice president. In 2005, he became the chairman and CEO of Amicus Therapeutics. Mr. Crowley has championed numerous public policy causes in the rare disease and healthcare space. He has previously served as the national chairman of the MakeAWish Foundation of America and is a founding board member of the Global Genes Project. Mr. Crowley and his family have been profiled on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. He is the author of a personal memoir entitled Chasing Miracles: The Crowley Family Journey of Strength, Hope, and Joy. His family also inspired the 2010 major motion picture Extraordinary Measures starring Harrison Ford. Mr. Crowley holds a BS in Foreign Service from Georgetown University, a JD from the University of Notre Dame Law School, and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He served as a commissioned intelligence officer in the United States Naval Reserve and is a veteran of the global war against terrorism with service in Afghanistan. We are going to take a moment to preview the trailer of the movie Extraordinary Measures.
both kids, it's the heart that's the real threat to their lives.
How much more time do we have?
Megan, maybe a year. Patrick, less.
I wish that we had a drug to treat Pompe, but we simply don't. I'm sorry.
Dr. Stonehill.
Yeah.
This is John Crowley. All the researchers out there say that you're a genius on the verge of a scientific breakthrough.
I'm not on the verge of anything.
How much would it take to prove your theory?
The odds against you are crushing. So where does that leave your kids when the dad has no job and no health insurance?
You're right. This is crazy. But I can't just sit around and wait for my kids to die. I promised them that we'd raise 500,000.
That's all? Is it 500 or 1,000?
500,000.
Are you totally insane?
Apparently.
Was he worth it? The Stonehill guy?
He's really eccentric, but his science is way ahead of everybody else's.
Do you have a wife?
Ex-wives. 2 of them.
Yeah? How come?
Because I'm so easy to get along with. Figure any dude in a business suit can help me raise venture capital and run the company. But who's going to be half as motivated as a dad who's trying to save his own kids?
We can do this. We push ourselves. We work around the clock.
I already work around the clock.
Great. Cure diseases in theory, but never help a single human being in reality.
I can't cure your kids, you know that, but I think I can save their lives.
And what if he succeeds too late? Then what?
You're in clinical trials by the end of the year, or we pull the plug.
Nobody is going to tell me how to run my lab.
We're out of time.
Are you crazy? You've jeopardized your chances of ever getting your kids treated. We are alive. We are strong.
Do you remember you told me that I should stop chasing miracles?
Well, don't get your hopes up, kid. Say Hail Mary.
Not gonna kiss me, is he?
I will restrain him.
Please join me in giving a warm University of Georgia welcome to Mr. John Crowley.
Emily, thank you so much for that warm and kind introduction, and it is such a special privilege and honor for me and for our family to be here on your beautiful campus to share our reflections about what's been a journey both in life and in learning, in business, in leadership, and I have to tell you what a privilege it is to be here, and I appreciate Dean Ayers, Provost Hugh, Keith and Twinker Mason for your vision and generosity to enable a program like this to be. The movie that you saw, the trailer, it's been almost a decade since Extraordinary Measures came out, and the movie captures beautifully well our family spirit. They made sure that they adhered to the science and the medicine, incredibly important to our family, that it be portrayed accurately. And while they took some liberties with the business, reflecting on what's been almost a decade since Extraordinary Measures was released, a couple of nights ago I was talking to my daughter Megan and talked about the movie and maybe we'll do something special around the 10th anniversary. And she said, you know, Dad, the movie actually, for all the accuracies, does contain what may be the greatest myth and exaggeration in the history of Hollywood. And so I asked Megan what that might be. Now, you may have guessed from the film, Megan is quite a precocious young lady. She said, well, Daddy, she said, that would be how they got an actor who is 6'5" to play you. So with that as background, I can tell you we are blessed, and the Irish nation is blessed. When our friends from the University of Georgia came and were kind enough to bring 50,000 of their friends to South Bend 2 years ago, I have to tell you it was among the classiest of visiting teams that we have ever had with their families, and I can say it's been absolutely reciprocated for our beautiful visit here in Athens. Talking earlier, one of the comments from the leadership here at Georgia was they were very impressed as the Notre Dame team came out 2 years ago out of the locker room, stormed the field as half the stadium cheered, and we got to the end zone, and the players took a knee. and they took a knee in prayer and say they were deeply touched by that. And they asked, do they do that at the opposing team stadium? And I said, oh, I promise you, we will take a knee and pray. In fact, it takes about 25 minutes to say a full rosary, so the game may be delayed a little bit. I was here in Atlanta at the Terry College of Business Third Thursday lecture. I had the privilege to deliver that lecture back in 2011. At that time, I was asked to come and speak about entrepreneurship. And I shared what were, in my reflections, some of the traits of great entrepreneurs. The vision, the risk-taking, the ability to be humble, to appreciate time. Here today, I've been asked to talk about leadership. And I think much like entrepreneurship, leadership really is a mindset. And so today I'll talk about leadership, specifically the challenge of leadership, and in particular in the business that I'm in, of making and delivering medicines to people, especially those living with rare, devastating diseases. What I see today in this environment, balancing the excitement of science and what it can bring to change lives and to alleviate an enormous amount of suffering. Balance that against the framework of the system that we have in place here in the United States, but also globally, to deliver it. And I see it as not only a challenge of leadership, but today, particularly in our business, I see it as a moral obligation to lead. To share these thoughts, I'll frame this against the background and lessons learned from 3 people living with a rare disease, each diagnosed as a child. One who I'd never met, one who I know quite well, and one who I'll have the chance to meet for the first time in a couple of weeks. And at the end, I'll share with you the one great trait that I think a leader, a true leader, must possess. So let me begin then by telling you about that first child. It's a young boy back in 1980, 7 years old, diagnosed with leukemia. And he was struggling and suffering. He was in Phoenix, Arizona, and time was Chris and his family's greatest enemy. Well, his life was changed by 2 people. And for all the nurses and doctors and family members and caregivers who were working to give him the best days of what would be his last days on earth, the 2 people who changed his life weren't part of the healthcare world. They were cops. A cop named Tommy Austin and a cop named Chris Cox. One night, they were out on a late-night stakeout. Tommy told the story to Chris as they were talking. He said, my wife's got a good friend, Linda, and her little boy, Chris, is really struggling with leukemia. And he said, the sad thing is, he has wanted to grow up and become a police officer. And they talk about how he was probably never going to get that chance. And they came up with an idea. They said, he's home now. He's out of the hospital. He's having a couple of good days. Why don't we make him a cop for a day? And so they called the mom the next day and they asked her, and she said he would love it, and he's strong enough to get out for a day or so. The doctor cleared him. And so what they did was they put a day together for little Chris, and they took him out and they gave him a little badge and a little police cap, and they took him for a ride in the police cars, and they took him up in a police helicopter, and he got to play with a canine unit. And at the end, he said, the end of the day, he said to the cops and everybody who was part of that, he said, that was the best day of my life. And he went back home. And that night, the police officers and their families and everybody who had made that day happen, they thought, we didn't make it special enough. We need to make him an official Arizona State Trooper. And so they called, and the judge said, I'd be willing to do it and deputize it. And the head of public safety in the state said, absolutely. We've never done it before, but Chris can become an honorary state trooper, and we'll actually have a judge deputize him. They said, but he needs a uniform. So they contacted the supply company. And they literally worked through the night to make him a uniform, and they got him his motorcycle wins. He wanted to be a motorcycle cop. And they went to his house the next morning to surprise him and surprise his mom, Linda, and show up. And they weren't there. Chris had an episode during the night and had to go to the hospital. And so they went to the hospital, and Chris was really struggling at that point. And they gave him his little Arizona State Trooper uniform. They swore him in. deputized him as a police officer. And Chris spent the last 72 hours of his life surrounded by that uniform, by the motorcycle wings. And I'll just was even reflecting this morning on what it meant. And Chris passed away on May 3rd, 3 days after that great day of being a police officer. And Tommy Austin, who is the retired U.S. Customs agent police officer who made that day happen, what he wrote about it, he said, Chris was only 7 years, 269 days old when he died. But he taught me about being a man. Even though he was only a boy, I can tell you that because of meeting Chris, I am an entirely different man. Ron Cox said the same thing, my partner. He said he didn't fear death anymore because he knew Chris would be there waiting for him. So I share that first story on the life of Chris because his life was not only transformed by those who had the power to give him that gift, to grant him his wish. It provided the inspiration for what became the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Chris was the first child ever to receive a wish, not because somebody said we're going to start an organization and we're going to file with the IRS and become a 501c3. It was because they saw a child in need and a couple of people who had it in their power to change his life. They did it. They did it because they could, and they did it because it was right. And a couple of weeks later, with his mom, Linda, they got together to think about, that time, the small time they had with Chris, and they said, I think we could do it for other children. And Chris became the first of what's now more than 300,000 children who have been granted a wish by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And I share that story because I think it shows that just by touching one life and going deep, you can change the lives of many. And you don't have to read leadership textbooks to do it. And so when it's in your power to change one life, maybe that's the only life you ever touch with that act. But many times those ripple effects can reach out and touch so many. I share that story too because it's also a great contrast in medicine and the power of science and technology. When Chris Gracious was diagnosed, leukemia was a 95% death sentence for children. Fewer than 5% of kids would ever survive childhood leukemia. Now, nearly 40 years later, those numbers have completely flipped. Leukemia in children is now 95% curable, and we're on our way to 100%. It's a great example of, over just a couple of decades, how science, research, this whole medical world can come together and save literally the lives of millions and millions of children. It took a lot of failures along the way. It had to be bold, had to be daring, had to be visionary, but it wasn't all that unique. So think about it, what it takes to make medicines. I went to law school and business school and spent a while in the Navy. I never really studied a lot of science, largely because I didn't like it, and I wasn't particularly good at it, judging by the 19 I got on my organic chemistry final at the Naval Academy. With the curve, it was a 38. But what it takes to make a medicine, you see it over and over again. We see it in the world of rare diseases. We see it in cancer. And it almost always starts with a patient in need, oftentimes a child. And if you think about making medicines as really this virtuous circle, where it starts with a patient in need, oftentimes it's a parent or a family member coming to a researcher in the academy at a university. And they start with the same 4 words. We have a problem. And a university researcher answering with another 4 words. I have an idea. So much of the great science and technology starts in universities. This university has played a tremendous role in much science and technology at the University of Georgia. In a few minutes in my talk, I'll give you a very specific example of how it has had a profound effect. Research done here at the University of Georgia, not just broadly in medicine, and not even just specifically in the rare diseases, but very specifically in our journey to make a medicine for Pompe disease. But this virtuous circle, again, if you start at the top and you move from the university research, oftentimes involving the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, or NIH-funded research, and then you'll see the technology come to a point where it may be spun out of a university. Continued research, maybe with a sponsored research agreement with an academic professor, and then you bring in entrepreneurs. Some are scientists, many times they're not. And then you need angel investors and venture capital investors. Get to the point then where you need a lot of consultants to come on board, and you need investment banks, and you need lawyers to form companies, organizations dedicated to a mission to extend and enhance lives. Most of those companies never succeed past a handful of people. We were blessed, we worked hard, we were a little lucky in that first company, Novozyme, and same now at our company, Amicus. And you get to the point then where you get into clinical studies. Virtually every molecule that goes into testing in humans, again, remembering only 1 in 10,000 that even goes into animal testing ever makes it into human testing. And even then, only about 1 in 10 that goes into human testing makes it to become the rarest of things that we can do in drug development. And that's to go from an idea to a molecule to an approved medicine. And you kind of feel like you want to put up the mission accomplished sign, you know, the day that our children were treated and 3 years later getting the medicine for Pompe approved for thousands of people living with Pompe disease was a great day. And I wished we were done, but we were not. It was a treatment, and it saved Megan and her brother Patrick's and many other people's lives. It reduced the enlargement of their heart, which was the most life-threatening aspect of their Pompe disease. It made Megan in particular much stronger for a time, but we realized within a year that it wasn't a cure, it was a treatment, and we were back at the beginning, looking for the next idea, the next science, the next technology. We had made a meaningful improvement in people's lives. Incremental, but meaningful. It gave us time together as a family, time to live life, but it also gave time for me as an entrepreneur and for our team of scientists as we put our company Amicus together to go back to the drawing board and to think about what may be next. And we've now having experimental therapy, a new potential next generation medicine for Pompe disease. We're now actually working in the world of gene therapies. And that's what's so exciting about this. And I can tell you when it comes to this virtuous circle of making medicines, it takes a lot of leaders along the way. And it doesn't have to be a leader being a CEO or a university provost or a dean. While those are important roles, it comes down ultimately to each individual who is part of that virtuous circle. We really are on the dawn of this golden age of medicine. When Megan was diagnosed on that Friday the 13th in March of 1998, the doctor, a very caring neurologist, told us that she had this rare Pompe disease, that there was very little research, there was nothing we could do, and that we should go home and enjoy the time we had. And I think even that night, Eileen and I went through a lot of emotions. We went through the shock, the grief, the denial, the anger, and we settled ultimately very quickly on determination. First, determined to learn everything we could about this disease, determined to meet anyone and everyone who may have an idea about how we could make a medicine to stop the progression of the disease, and finally determined to get it to our Megan and Patrick and to as many people as quickly as possible. And while they made a movie about our family, that really does encapsulate a journey of countless people whose lives were kind of going the way they had planned, and all of a sudden, a diagnosis gets in the way. Whether it's cancer, or Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's, or a rare genetic disease, trisomy 13, whatever it may be, you know, we are all born with our genetic code. And not until that manifests itself in a disease or an illness, may be triggered by the environment, oftentimes triggered by things we don't yet understand, it changes your life. And you begin to think about, who are the doctors I should see? Who are the nurses who should care for me? Where are the hospitals I should go to? And you get thrust into that virtuous circle, sometimes in an instant. And it can be scary, but to think about the science that we have now, when Megan and Patrick were diagnosed, I read all these academic papers. I didn't understand most of them, but I kept learning and learning and reading, and I'd call everybody who wrote any academic paper in Pompe disease. One of whom was a researcher up at Johns Hopkins. He had published on gene therapy and an animal study he had done in a mice engineered to have Pompe disease, showing he could cure the mouse. And I thought, my God, a cure for Pompe disease. This whole notion that he could design the genetic sequence that Megan and Patrick were missing, put it into a virus, deliver it to their body, and the virus would infect their cells with the DNA that they were missing, could correct the disease. That is a cure. Incredibly exciting. So gave us some hope. I called the researcher and asked, how soon until it's in patients? He said about a year. 21 years later, although we're on the cusp, we still don't have a gene therapy treating people living with Pompe disease. In the next year, it looks like there may be 2 or 3 different programs of gene therapies delivered in people living with Pompe. Gene therapy itself for 30 years has been the promise to ultimately heal many human genetic diseases and unlock the potential for how do we treat much more prevalent disorders. It's been a dream for a long time. There have been countless failures along the way. People have died in clinical studies trying to understand how we can perfect gene therapy technology. Just a year and a half ago, the FDA, though, approved the first ever gene therapy for a rare form of inherited blindness, literally causing a young child who is blind, children with blindness, to be able to see. So we have this great science, again, the ability to alleviate this enormous amount of suffering, to extend and enhance life, to truly do God's work here on earth. But we're also at a major inflection point in how and for whom and for how fast we can translate this great science into medicines for all. And that's where we get to this ecosystem and particularly the business model and framework that we have for delivering medicines. It is very unique here in the United States. If you go to other countries in the world where they have a single-payer system, socialized medicine, where entrepreneurship in the biological sciences either doesn't exist or is in a very small state, patients don't always have access to these cutting-edge medicines. That first company, Novozyme, that we founded, originally funded with, my dad was a cop growing up in North Jersey, and after all those schools, I had a lot of student loans, and so what we lacked in wealth, we tried to make up with in passion and determination. But passion and determination don't meet a payroll, so we took what little resources we had in a home equity loan on our house to begin the company Novozyme, meeting our first payroll funded by the prestigious venture capital firms of Visa and MasterCard. But we came upon some great science that held great hope and promise for how you could treat Pompe disease. It was a great story. The movie, I think, is as much about entrepreneurship as it is about science and medicine and our family dynamic. And again, when we realized that medicine and Patrick and Megan had saved their lives, had extended their lives, given them better quality of life, given us a chance to go back to the drawing board, we put together an awfully big drawing board. We had a big vision, and we started our second company in biotechnology, the company I still run today, Amicus Therapeutics. Founded in New Jersey out of technology, out of a university, the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City. But we had a big vision that we wanted to start an organization, a company that would be an enduring and lasting company. Novozyme start to finish was only 18 months until we were acquired by Genzyme, and we went there to accomplish our work with Pompe. We wanted Amicus to be an independent company. Because we had had some success, I didn't have to borrow money on the house to start this one. We raised about $150 million in venture capital. We went public in 2007, and today we're a company of almost 600 employees with a $2.5 billion market value, and we have offices or employees in 27 countries. So it has not been a straight line forward. We've had plenty of setbacks, mistakes, failures. This is a tough business, biotechnology. Almost everything we do, everything we try, despite the money we have, raised from private and public investors, the brilliant scientists and drug developers and business people we have in our company, almost everything we try, it doesn't work. But when it does, I still believe it's one of the best jobs you can have. So the environment in which we make these medicines is really unique and really special. We are, in America, the medicine chest of the world. But the U.S. healthcare system is far from perfect. Its strength, though, I believe, is in a market-based system, one that encourages innovation and entrepreneurship and ultimately does provide the fastest and most broad access to better treatments and better cures. Medicines, therapeutics make up about 14% of the overall healthcare spending in America. So a small but important part of it. And yet we hear from elected officials, policymakers over and over again, words that demonize our industry. And it's greatly under attack. Dr. Janet Woodcock, who runs the drug division at FDA, is a remarkable woman. A week ago, Dr. Woodcock talked about the system being broken. And she said, until the guy living under the bridge can get access to a life-saving, cutting-edge medicine in cancer, it doesn't work. And you know what? Dr. Woodcock is right. Making great medicines and great science is not enough. I believe that we've got a responsibility to ensure cures are affordable and accessible to everybody who needs them. We hear a lot about single-payer systems, about socialized medicine. We see a lot in the public about a move toward socialized system of healthcare. I am not a proponent of a socialized system of healthcare. We need to improve the system we have to ensure that medicines are affordable to everybody and that we have 100% access and provide universal healthcare here in this country. But I can tell you that socialism leads people to feel like burdens to be managed, rather than human beings to be given the opportunity to succeed and to thrive. And in systems where the government is the sole supplier and controller of healthcare, people move from being reliant to compliant. Socialized medicine is great if you're not sick. The humorist P.J. O'Rourke commented that if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait until it's free. So drug development is under attack, but we've got to respond. We can't simply say that we invest in research and development. We do, as a biopharmaceutical industry, not when we spend twice as much on marketing and advertising. So I believe that we're under attack, not just because of some of the outliers who were bad actors, and there are those, but broadly as an industry. Again, we've got a moral obligation to lead, to change our own industry from within. A couple of weeks ago, the Business Roundtable got together leading CEOs in the country. 191 of them signed a document saying that their sole objective is not only to shareholders, that there are shared stakeholders, employees, in our case, patients, shareholders for sure. It has to be that dual ecosystem, and that's something that I believe our industry being under attack is not because science has failed. It's been because of a failure of leadership, a failure of trust, and we've lost the moral authority to lead. Through indiscriminate price increases, games that companies have played with their patents, we try to do things differently at Amicus. We try to lead the whole company. Even in choosing our company's name, we picked the Latin word for friend. We wanted to be the most patient-focused, friendly company in all of biotechnology. And I, from day one, have told anybody who's considering investing in our company that our number one mission is to deliver the highest quality medicines to people living with diseases. Patients are our primary stakeholder. And it's a dual mission with our shareholders. Capital and being able to build a vibrant, successful business is going to be the lifeblood of our success. But these are not competing forces. I believe that they're actually quite complementary, and if we do it right, if we make great medicines and we get them to as many people as quickly as possible, we will not only advance shareholder interest, we will maximize shareholder return and build the company that I've always envisioned. At Amicus, we have patient advisory boards. We have a chief patient advocate who reports directly to me. We promise patients access forever. If a patient comes into our clinical studies, they will never come off our medicine. We promise that our medicines must be fairly priced and broadly accessible. We made a promise that we would never raise the price of our medicines above consumer inflation. We also made a promise through our Rare Bridges program that people in the developing world will have access to our medicines. I think now it's the time to lead in our industry, and we need a social contract. We need to be able to say, look, there are many great businesses in America. You can make a successful business doing designer handbags or real estate development. There's many great and noble businesses that advance the welfare of our society, but I think what we do in healthcare comes with a special obligation. Rather than talk about the second patient who has framed how I view this moral obligation, I'm going to show you a 90-second video on our daughter, Megan. We'll tell you a little bit more about her journey. And her journey through, the video shows that by the end of her sophomore year at Notre Dame, Megan graduated from Notre Dame just in May. So if you guys would cue the second video, and then I'll conclude.
Megan was 14 months old when she was diagnosed with Pompe disease.
We were told that she wouldn't live to be maybe 2 years old, so we were most focused on just getting past the next few days and months.
We have taught Megan that she is no different from anybody else. Just because she can't walk or breathe on her own, that doesn't mean she can't do everything, just about anything anybody else can do.
She's gotten deeply involved in the MakeAWish Club, now the president of the MakeAWish Club.
The only way that a child could do this is to want to do it themselves.
When you think about the challenges that Megan lives with every day, we able-bodied people would look at that and think, oh my God, how does she do it? For Megan, I think she looks at it and thinks, how do you not do it? This is my life.
Megan is absolutely going to graduate. Megan's going to get a job. She's going to get married. And she's going to have children. And she will tell you the exact same thing.
Megan's story is one also about entrepreneurship, about leadership, and it's also about the power of medicine. And we are deeply grateful for the research that's been done here at the University of Georgia by Dr. Kelly Moorman at the Complex Carbohydrate Research Center. For more than 19 years, Kelly and his team have been collaborators with us. A number of his colleagues now work at Amicus, and their ability to design technology that help us evaluate the carbohydrates of our medicine, that allow the targeting of our medicine to get to Megan and Patrick's muscles, are a good part of why Megan is here today. So thank you very much to everybody at Georgia. The third patient that I'll conclude with here is one I've not yet met. It's a young boy named Tegan, and I got an email from Tegan's mom. And I get emails from lots of people living with rare diseases and their family members, and I got this note that I'll read you, just these couple of sentences. Mom wrote me a couple of weeks ago, said, let me tell you about my son, Tegan. Tegan is adopted. Tegan was found in a ditch on the side of the road in Ethiopia, covered in cigarette burns, whimpering, shivering, and barely alive, at just under 1 year of age. He was placed in our orphan care center in Ethiopia. I met him the day he came in, the last day of my trip. I returned 3 weeks later, and Tegan was still just barely alive. You see, the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew something in my heart flipped, and I knew he was my son, and I would do anything in my power to save this precious boy. I've not yet met Tegan. He lives with a rare brain disease called Battens Disease. We do research in Battens Disease. His particular form of Battens Disease we hope to be able to develop a gene therapy for and to bring forward. So for Chris Gracious, for whom science and medicine didn't move fast enough, and for Megan, and Patrick and others living with Pompe, for whom it moved fast enough to save their lives but not yet cure them, and for Tegan, again, I believe we've got this moral obligation to lead, a moral obligation to get medicines to as many patients as quickly as possible. To do that takes a lot of leadership from a lot of people at our company and this entire ecosystem. Let me conclude by noting that the greatest skill that I believe a leader can possess and develop is empathy, to feel the hope of another. At Amicus, I ask each of our employees for only one thing, and that's every decision you make, think about it as if you had that disease or were the parent of a child living with a rare disease. And so, believing that empathy is the most important trait a leader can demonstrate, I'll end with this quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald. To be kind is more important than to be right. Many times what people need is not a brilliant mind that speaks, but a special heart that listens. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for this great honor. Good luck, dogs. And go Irish. Couple of minutes for questions.
I think we have just a minute or two for questions, and so question right here.
Good morning, Mr. Crowley. My name is Akil Hazari, and I'm a senior Leonard Leadership Scholar here, majoring in Management Information Systems and Real Estate. My question is, what is the hardest decision that you've had to make along this journey?
You know, it's you can come to this world of making medicines with a lot of passion and bring great scientists and come with a lot of energy to start a program. Nothing is more exciting than that first day you say, you know, this disease, take Battens disease, and we started that research almost a year ago, came from another dad who had two daughters who I met and brought him in and saw what he had funded, and we were all excited and said, yeah, we're going to put actually quite a bit of money into research for Battens disease, and there's 13 forms of Battens. It is the largest brain disease childhood killer of any human genetic disease, the leading cause of blindness in children. Really excited to be a part of that. What I've learned, though, is the hardest thing in drug development is knowing when to stop. When have you, either through preclinical research, studies in mouse models, or if you're in patients, when do you say, you know what, this either isn't safe enough or isn't going to be effective enough? Because you've only got limited resources, even no matter how much you raise. And you're also always battling time. You know, time is, in our business, it's kind of a double-edged, you know, sword, if you will, and some great irony. On one hand, what we're really trying to do is to just get people more time. Time with the people they love on this earth. But time is also our greatest enemy. We're up against the clock, I think, more than most. So knowing when to stop, pivot, go back to the drawing board is the hardest decision. We've had to make that many, many times.
Hi, my name is Frank Lumpkin. I'm a finance major here at UGA, finishing up my last year. Thank you so much for coming today, Mr. Crowley. And my question is, you talk about reforming American healthcare. What do you believe is the first step to reforming our healthcare system? And do you believe it's steps that need to be taken by the government, or is it more by corporations?
I think it has to begin with us. I think it has to begin with that deep reflection, a recommitment to say, you know, again, what we do is this special obligation. It is different than any other business. And the sacred trust that's been placed in us, intellectual property, patents, are granted by the government as part of a public trust. And it's an important part of, you know, the ecosystem to make our medicines. And when they expire, those medicines should go into the public domain. So, and that doesn't always happen. So I think for us to be self-reflective and self-policing, to just acknowledge that our first mission is for people living with the disease, people with any healthcare issue. So I think it's got to begin with us. We've got specific policy prescriptions, some of which, I said kind of what we do at Amicus. I'm deeply engaged with the industry and trying to get the industry to think broadly. And there are many great champions of this perspective. I think we need to evolve there, because if we don't, you see some of the policies that are talked about in Washington. If we import price controls into the United States, we're also going to import waiting lines, lack of access to medicine, and we're going to lose what could be this ability to cure so much disease. So it's got to begin with us, and that's what takes leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, thank you for incredibly inspiring words. Great example of outstanding public leadership and making impact.
Thanks, Dean.
We're thrilled and blessed to have you with us today. Please accept this gift.
I will happily.
From Terry College and University of Georgia.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Keith Mason to come up and close us out today. Keith?
Thank you, Dean, for allowing me a few minutes to close on this outstanding lecture that was delivered by John Crowley. As the parent of a child with disabilities, I can certainly understand the plight and the journey that you've been on. And I also want to thank you for your strong public leadership in trying to make a difference in the lives of so many people. This leadership lecture series was begun by my wife and I to plant seeds of public leadership in the business school students here at the University of Georgia, among many others. We've had a number of other outstanding alumni of this great institution deliver lectures on this campus, such as Dan Amos of Aflac, Pete Carell, Billy Payne, and many others, and also people from outside our institution, such as Secretary Bob Rubin, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. And I hope that what you have heard here today among the students will also plant a seed of spirit of service to take the values that you're learning here in the College of Business, particularly through the entrepreneurial program that has begun, and also consider the public aspects of your journey and bring some other additional great public leadership along the lines of our great speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for your support of this wonderful series. Thank you all for being here today in the sense of friendship and what this weekend represents. Go Irish, go Dogs, have a wonderful weekend. We all are adjourned.